Welcome back to another episode of 22 at the Lips. I'm your podcast host, Alexis, and today is another exciting episode. But first, if you are new to the podcast, this is the podcast where we have EMS providers, healthcare providers, anybody and everybody in between who come on, talk about real life topics in this field, in this job, what we do, why we do it, things like that. Today is going to be a little different, not too anything crazy, but I want to get into a very near and dear to my heart medication and talk about why we give it, why we shouldn't give it, if we shouldn't at all, anything like that. But before we get into that, today's guest, not a stranger to the podcast. Aaron, you've been on before. You've kind of given your spiel, but if you want to give a brief little blurb about yourself, remind the people who you are, what you stand for.
Yeah, so I'm Aaron, formerly of Paramedic. Currently, we just call it the Pragmed Show. I'm a paramedic. I've done a whole host of work within the industry over the last, 15 years or so. And started a podcast, and so now people, I guess, listen to me both literally and figuratively. I do have a new site for the show. I don't know if Alexis, if you want to throw that in just as like a link later, if it matters. But to the page, we can't post on the old page currently. So if you're going to go, then that link will drive you to the new actual podcast, because I don't have access to the other podcast either.
Oh, no, it's not funny. We'll link that in, let the people find you. It's good stuff, and it's not necessarily just like educational stuff, which I appreciate. It's also things that actually matter in this field. You give room for the people to, I mean, I hate to say argue topics, because it's not about arguing. It's here's facts, here's data, here's a point, here's whatever it is. This is why we should or shouldn't do it. And then you have the inevitable trolls that like to take it and run with it. But
yeah, the idea that it's almost like trolling backward, like the way that we present the information. With it being that it does, because what you want is to evoke a response. Like if it's just everything that everybody agrees with, well, I mean, like if I was like to post about how cool blood is, okay, everybody knows that. Like we have fun with that. Like that's not fun anymore. And sometimes the stuff that we need to talk about is the stuff that sucks and that makes us how we appear to the public. And then the other health carriers within the big old complex. You know what I mean? We don't want to look like just some stupid ambulance driver.
Very true. Very true.
I think more as a
So
with that,
which is also kind of why I wanted to get you on to talk about the use of ketamine in this field, just because I like somebody that doesn't just agree with points or just say, oh yeah, this is what the data says, and then move on with life. But to get into the nitty gritty of like, yeah, this could be bad, this could be good. Let's talk about why. So ketamine. Tell me,
go ahead.
Tell me when, how, why have you given ketamine? What have been, if you've given ketamine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I figured. Tell me the reasons why you've given ketamine, and like, have you had any negative drawbacks with it?
Yes, and yes. I've administered ketamine on again a whole host of reasons. Pain probably being one of the smallest of them, not for controlling pain per se, but to increase sedation, mainly during critical care transport and stuff like that. I've seen it used as secondary as a pain management tool in 911 protocols, but it's usually used in conjunction with or another analgesic type medication like fentanyl. And it does have good use when you pair the two together if you're trying to control pain. I think as a sedative, personally, it's wonderful in the transport environment. People complain about other drugs like propofol not being so great on the street because like every single bump and bounce, your patient's back awake, and you're trying to, you're trying to manage and titrate the drip just to enough, and it can be scary and harrowing when you have somebody whose pressure is not so great, and you're trying to sedate them, but you're also trying to control their pressures. And so ketamine again, so people say it doesn't have hemodynamic effects. It might. The data, it kind of talks like positively about its hemodynamic effects. I know I've been weary of it in STEMIs as pain management. In fact, during critical care transport, we elected against using it as a pain control just because of the dogma. I don't even know if it's truly true. I honestly don't have the data in front of me to tell you that somebody said somewhere there's a STEMI as a problem, don't give it. It functions it can affect it, but I've never seen it cause any real problems to a patient's blood pressure. Have I seen it impact breathing and respiratory? I've heard, not seen. Somebody told me that they pushed it and it was right before landing at a facility and the patient went apneic for such and such a period of time. But fortunately, the crew was equipped with a BVM. So they BVM'd it out of it and the patient was fine. The only other side effect that I've seen with it, and again, this was primarily during critical care transports, and I'm not saying all these patients were critical, but we were utilizing it as kind of a sedative pain mix. Like that, the dosage that we were using was like a 50 and 100, I think. I can't remember IV. I'm sorry if I don't have the numbers 100%.
You're good.
Some people loved it. Some patients, rather. Some patients, not so much. Like they had a bad experience, and I felt bad for them because, unfortunately, when we followed the protocol just said to administer it over X period of time. But most people don't administer it over X period of time. They kind of push it fast because they're trying to control whatever the situation is. And the few times I recall specifically where we were pushing the full dosage, and again, I don't have those numbers, but it was IV, and it could have been weight-based, and it could have just been a standard fixed dose. But either way, the patient either expressed fear and some hallucinatory kind of effects. Nothing too extreme to where we had to administer another drug like Versed. But I'm sure that patient didn't really like that feeling for that period of time. I also don't know, being in the back of a helicopter is scary in and of its own, like at night. Mm-hmm. So, it does that exacerbate the problem. Overall, I haven't used it in a while, just because of where I work. It's just not accepted like it should be, or like it is in some places, rather. It's used as a pain dose, and it's used as a drip, and it's used probably too little, like they're not using enough.
Yeah. And that's where you get the people spacing out and having that major dissociative, just absolute interaction, as if you're underdosing it. If you're and you can overdose it like any medication, but it's knowing that very sweet spot of having your patient just mellowed out, sedated enough, but not to where you're having to throw a tube because they're absolutely too relaxed and too chill.
Do you have it in your current protocols?
Yes, we actually have it if it's severe enough pain to use not refractory, to use instead of opioids.
And do you have like a RAD score, or do you utilize just clinical, like personal judgment?
Clinical personal judgment in our protocol, and I checked it right before recording. It's literally if it's a pain scale greater than 7.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds about right. Like before ketamine came along, fentanyl obviously was one of the big ones, morphine too, but fentanyl was something that I used frequently, and it was always at 7. Like if
Yeah.
the patient has a 7, we give the strongest that we have, and I think we started at 100 mics. So with ketamine, um, are you allowed to pair them, or is it just by itself?
You have to call med control if you're going to pair them.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I agree with that. I wholly agree, but just because ketamine is a big drug, but if you're pairing an opioid with that, with all of the side effects that the opioid can give, you should be calling somebody that has a higher degree than what you have.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is who knows what else is going on with this patient? Like if you're not able to control their pain with X number, or you're trying to, and this goes to sedation as well. But if you're not able to, something else is like, someone else needs to be involved in helping you think through this process. Like I've never been in a hospital situation where there wasn't more than like 8 million clinicians standing around trying to figure out a problem. So to me, it just seems funny that, you expect like a medic, and EMT, and like some schmo cop to resolve like this patient's potentially metabolic disturbance, or, some sort of brain like who knows what's going on with them. So it's usually good to have like a secondary person. And we did a topic, oh gosh, a long time ago when Jason and I did one on can't remember his name. Cricum If You Got Him was the doctor's like handle on Instagram. And one of the things we talked about was like online medical direction, and how people kind of like don't like using it because their orders get denied a lot. But I like it. Like I like being told like, yeah, you're stupid almost. Like don't do that. Like what made you think that was a good idea? Like it's okay to be wrong. Like I think people are just afraid to be wrong and look dumb on the radio. And like I would much rather look dumb on the radio than bring in somebody who was alive before I picked them up.
Yeah. Like it's very much that ego kick of being told no, but also like, man, I'm not a scaredy cat when it comes to some stuff, but also like I don't want that on my hands if something goes wrong. I recently had a student, and I was asking him like, what else do you want to give? What else do you want to do? And I think he held up bicarb, and I said, okay, why? He looked at me, he's like, I don't really know. I said, okay, let's put it away. And so after, I was like, you weren't wrong for it, whatever it was. I said, you weren't wrong for it. I said, but I personally, even if it's in the protocols, I would have called ahead just to be safe and just to make sure, just because like you said, we're not just paramedics, but like we're just paramedics, just EMTs, just firefighters, whatever we are in the field. We have just a very limited amount of like diagnostic testing and tools in our disposal. Sometimes when you're picking up those big medications, not that, bicarb is one, but like when you're picking up medications, and it kind of goes into ketamine, it goes into any other medication. We have lots of them, but we need to know the how we're giving it, why we're giving it, knowing that we have the potential to treat the patient with whatever we're about to give, but also we have the potential to cause harm. And that's why it's important to know when you're giving something, when you're not giving something, your indications, contraindications, and when you're giving it, what could go wrong, because there's always potential for something to go wrong. And I think that's also why not just ketamine, but a lot of medications have drawback of, oh, we shouldn't have that in EMS just because this could go wrong. That doesn't mean it's gonna go wrong. It could. And knowing what could happen.
it goes back to this old idea that medics have a challenging position because you're either between a rock and a hard place in a lot of situations. The nice thing is we have that resource, which is the hospital, typically. Like, if you're a paramedic and you work in the United States, most of the time you're transporting a patient to a hospital. Like, in an hour or less, most likely you're going to be the person that's, seeing something else. It's on the street where the decisions are made that can be life and death. And a lot of times you're guided by your own experience, and you know what's going to happen clinically. So you prepare by, I don't know, starting a line, maybe preloading them with some fluid. Who knows? Whatever the case may be, it's utilizing the clinical experience and judgment along with those guidelines. And if the person had said during the code, the reason I pulled out bicarb is because it was the last ditch effort, and I thought maybe they had a whole list of medications, and maybe one of them was like a tricyclic antidepressant. So that was my rationale. Would it work? Who knows? You know what I mean? Like, who knows? The thing sorry to get off on a little side rail here, but the thing that kills me about this all, no pun intended, is it's like at some point you're really just exposing that patient to more torture. You know what I mean? Like it's like, okay, 20 minutes. What's the real likelihood that someone at that state is going to come back and have any neurological? So if you're going to do it, you might as well do it like at the very beginning of the code. Going back to other drugs, ketamine, they're all dangerous. I mean, aspirin's dangerous. I mean, it isn't like giving rocuronium, but it certainly has its side effects. Before ketamine, Versed was one of the go-to, and I still like Versed. Was one of our go-to chemical sedatives, and people mess that up. They give too much. They prone patients. It's all about using your resources and kind of knowing what you said, the sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
Like, what can I do to de-escalate this situation? Is medication the best going IV? Is medication best going IM? Is it best going IN? Like, should I tie them down first? Do I need to pre-oxygenate them? What should I do? What can I do to fix this? Did we really just like not miss a blood sugar? You know what I mean? Like, what if it's 34 or 42? Or what if, there's somebody who's, like you picked up, I'm sure, people on lactulose that don't take it, and now their ammonia levels are through the roof, and they're goofy as hell. And, who knows what they're going to do? Who knows what anybody's going to do? I listened to, what's the podcast? MCHD.
Yeah.
Montgomery County. They did one on ketamine, which I think is really good. They have pretty strong, robust protocols, and they utilize resources like OMD and district supervisors and all of that. Using your clinical judgment, and not just relying on you sometimes can make or break the situation on how, like, even in the situation where I was paired with a nurse and they administered the ketamine, and before he pushed it, I said, "Are you sure you want to push that fast?" He was like, "Well, it's not going to do anything." I was like, "Okay, dude, I'm telling you, I think you should put it in a bag and drip it in over 10 minutes. And he was like, "I've done this before, dude. I work in, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "All right, you do what you do." So he pushed it. Sure enough, we were singing Elton John, in 30 seconds. That guy, yeah, I mean, he was having after the initial scream of wreck, like, I think the situation for me would have been scary was he was in a motor vehicle crash. He was not the driver, he was a passenger. And I think he had like an unstable pelvis and like a couple fractured ribs. So like we didn't pick up at scene, we picked up at ascending. So that was nice of me. We had him all packaged up. And he gets in the helicopter and he's in pain. Like, So we were talking about giving ketamine because it was at the time was like 50, 100. I can't remember like what the doses were. And I had learned either through a podcast or from a friend about the drip over like 10 minutes. And because I had seen what pushing fast does. And he pushed it fast. And that guy freaked the fuck. I mean, sorry for my language, but he freaked out. He woke up in the back of a helicopter at 2,000 feet with some weird dude facing him with a blue light behind. You know what I mean? Yeah. I would be singing Elton John too. We're fortunate that was the side effect. Like it was a freak out but like, what if he was a big boy. Like, what if he had gotten up from even with an unstable pelvis, what if he had gotten up and like started fighting in the back of the helicopter?
Yeah.
I don't want that. So yeah, just, use your friends. If you have, I think what they said on the podcast was like, if you have to think about it, be really careful using it as a sedative. Ketamine.
Yeah.
Like if you have time to think about it, maybe you don't need to give max dosage ketamine for sedation.
I have been in situations where without ketamine, it would have resulted in serious harm to myself or my partner or even the patient themselves. Mm-hmm. I'm going to link them in the notes or whatever. There's a lot of data of actually ketamine being very hemodynamically, like what is creating hemodynamic stability, or it keeps hemodynamic stability, whatever you want to call it. Basically, there's a lot of research out there that says it doesn't increase ICP. It doesn't tank blood pressures or raise them up exponentially. It doesn't do all that, but also it can be safer for patients in shock to give them the ketamine if they need it for pain, sedation, whatever you want to call it, just because if they're already hyperperfusing, a little bit of a raise in blood pressure isn't going to hurt anything, obviously. I mean, you're not going to anyways. I also like to think
you can pair it too, and I think that's something that it really works like, I don't know if it's in your protocols or if you've seen it paired or read about it paired, but pairing it with fentanyl, like if you're trying to like really think about hemodynamics and like comfort, it's fantastic. Like I wish somebody would give me like a fentanyl ketamine drip at night for bed.
It sounds like a good time.
I'm on a Remeron pill, like I have like that is what I have to take. But I feel like it would be pretty awesome to be on a fentanyl ketamine drip. Like people on Dilaudid are nicer.
A lot nicer. I personally have, and this was in a medically, as a patient, I wasn't tolerating CPAP and I needed CPAP immediately. So I didn't know. I got a micro dose of ketamine and I got the worst dissociative phase with it. Like I can still vividly remember it. And you're in the cusp of it because you can't get out of it. So, but even even with it, like even with that vivid memory, I'm still not going to hesitate to give it if I need to give it, just because it's.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I can agree with you because I can empathize and sympathize with you. I'll tell you a brief story. I was abroad, so I was like out of the United States, and in my pack out, when I was in country, I was able to get medications that you don't get here, right? To include fentanyl and ketamine. Versed. And these were for people, not for me. Not for me. These were for these were for patients.
Little midnight snacks.
Yeah. These were for patients, and so I had a lot of gear, and there was a point where I had to transfer equipment from a bag to another contractor's bag. Like, we're going to hand you this, and you're going to be the guy that goes and takes the medicine, because I wanted to go home. I wanted to come back to the States and go home. So I very briefly packed and transferred, and I did not do a very good job because I brought it back with me. And I'd never tried ketamine before, so I tried it on myself. And it was horrible. It was horrible, but I will say I underdosed is what happened. I did exactly I got to that point where I don't even remember the dosing, but like it felt very micro machine-y. Like I felt like I was in some sort of like different universe, and I was doing things that I didn't have control of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
But again, like you said, I still wouldn't hesitate, because I definitely don't remember feeling pain or being uncomfortable. It was just like I was stuck, and I just had to wait for it to end.
I think I also like to think of it like with other medications, like Versed, like you talked about. If I have a patient that is seizing in front of me, and we just got there, and as soon as we roll up, family's already, ushering us in, pointing this way, waving frantically, patients there seizing. I don't have time, and I'm not going to get a blood pressure. I'm not going to sit there and contemplate, like, should I give Versed? What if the blood pressure is too low? But that's going to increase instability, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm going to give the Versed because my patient's seizing. I'm going to treat the thing right there in front of me, and just already know what's going to happen next should things hit the fan,
So you can prepare yourself, like you're going to have a bag about mask available, oxygen already hooked up, and maybe an NPA or whatever. Yeah, I think that's the key is people are so unprepared. They react, and then the worst possible situation occurred. I remember a time being on a flight. My partner and I, like, let's be honest, peds are always hard. It doesn't really matter. Like, even if they're not hard, they are until they're not. Like, once you get them off your truck, then you're like, oh, that was easy.
Yes.
That was simple. That was nothing. I knew what I was doing the whole time, and you didn't know a thing. So we got called out to a hospital out somewhere north of here, and it was for status seizures on a kid. And we have pretty rigid protocols. Like, it calls for Keppra and it calls for Versed. You can intubate, obviously, but it's frowned upon, especially in peds. At the time, we had, I think, I don't remember what our supraglottic airway choice was. It might have been an iGel. I don't know. But anyhow, so like we get to the hospital, and the kid at the time wasn't seizing, like when we got there, and he was on a Keppra drip, or we started a Keppra drip. I can't remember. And he was on the drip as we were pushing him out to the front yard of this hospital. So that was kind of funny. And we get him in the helicopter, and I decided to sit in a working seat, which that was just a stupid choice by me. And the kid starts seizing. And so, like, our reaction wasn't we're gonna like load up on Keppra, like we're like gonna push Versed. And so we went with a weight-based, I think, calculation. We had his weight from the hospital and did the math and came up with whatever the number was. I can't remember specifics, but his oxygen saturations went from like 97s to 60s. and like his color went not great.
Oh man.
Yeah, and we were lifting. Like we weren't even like, he pushed it and then we lifted. And so like I'm looking out the window because policy is you're supposed to look out the window the whole time until you're up a certain amount. So looking. And I looked back at this poor kid, and it wasn't that long. Like it seemed like a lot longer than it was. And we get up, and I'm like, I need like a BBM. And my partner was like, a what? Because it's on this radio, the ICS. And I was like, I need a BBM, please. This kid's not breathing. And he was like, I got this. Like, that is not a BVM, that's a non-rebreather. That is a simple mask, sir. I need something. It's something else. And like it. I threw it on the kid because I was like, I got to give him something. Like I should be doing mouth to mouth maybe, but we got the bag of masks put together and we bagged the kid up and it was fine. Within like a minute, the kid's color was back and he was satting great. Ooh, emergency diverted. We probably could have done a lot better. We should have done a lot better. Like we should have had a BVM out already attached to oxygen suction hooked up. Prepared for the worst kind of thing. We did not. We just kind of flung it and the kid got lucky. So that goes with any medication, like the Elijah McClain case.
That's what I was about to bring up. It's knowing what to prepare for best case and worst case scenario, but it's also just using common sense. Because I'm not going to speak on behalf of that entire case, but if you're monitoring your patient, if you give them a medication, especially like ketamine, and then you put everything on them, like the SpO2 probe, the blood pressure cuff, and end-tidal capnography, you'll know when bad things are happening. Not as soon as, but you could even say before they start happening. You can watch your SpO2 saturation start dropping. You can see on the end-tidal capnography, hey, they're not breathing that great. Let me go ahead and fix this before things get worse.
Yeah, I think it's easy to push blame on the providers that made the mistake. It's harder to look at yourself and your practice and say, have I done that? Like, have I ever been culpable of doing that? And most of us are probably going to say no, because the truth of the matter is we all probably have at some point listened to the police or didn't do a complete, assessment before performing an intervention. So on the Elijah McClain case, I don't mind speaking on it, but I think the information that we have available to us today about that case, it's really easy to look back and say, here's the mistake, here's the mistake, here's the mistake. You know what I mean? Like, super easy. Like I can review that case all day long and tell you where the mistakes were made. Are those providers innocent? No, they're guilty. They made a lot of errors. The biggest one being, I think, listening to a non-healthcare provider tell you what to do. This patient is fighting us. This patient is doing this. This patient is that. And your observation, when you get the patient and they're not doing those things, they're just laying there. That tells me a lot about what I need to do next. It's really not about medication administration at that point. It's changing the scenery. Mm-hmm. It's getting that patient out of that scenery. It's stepping up and becoming a patient advocate. And whether the police like your response to the situation, if you're going to do it, you've got to be a patient advocate. It's easier said than done. It really is. It's easy to be a patient advocate the next morning. It's harder to do it when the police are all there, right? And they've got a knee in someone's neck and you're a medic, you know, who's on your team? Is it the cops?
Yeah.
Or is it the patient? And you could say both. The public is really who is on our team. It's the public that we protect, and we protect ourselves. And so if the situation calls for the use of ketamine, that in that large of a dose, like you said, you should be completely prepared, right? If you did a good evaluation, you know, and it's hard to say. Like if I was in the medic's shoes and I had to evaluate Elijah McClain, I'm sorry. I think I would have gotten on my knees and I would have assessed his airway. I would have tried to feel for a carotid. I would have asked a question. Like I think I can say this now, but I think I would have tried to get close to him and been like, "Hey man, hey, what's going on?" Like just to see like what was he experiencing, because you could see it in someone's eyes. Like they're not fighting anymore. That person they're just not, they've given up on the fight. You won. So now you got to kind of move them to the back of the ambulance, get them some oxygen, maybe get them some fluids. Who knows? Get them to the hospital, like establish an airway. Even I don't know. I think, unfortunately for Mr. McClain, he suffered as a result of just poor overall scene management and doing things that, as a medic, you should be doing and not be doing. And that's doing assessment and not following the instructions of a non-healthcare provider. Like no cop should tell you and then you do it. This patient needs ketamine. Can they observe the situation and feel like this is what's been done in the past? Yeah, absolutely. That's good information. Right? That's telling you what the cop is seeing. This cop is really fighting. He's struggling. He's scared. Something is going on. Like with this guy, he thinks that I need ketamine. So do I need ketamine, or do I need to help de-escalate the situation and just remove the patient? Because you can get the patient on the cot. You know what I mean? Like you've taken them away from the police. Police are no longer beating them up anymore. And if you're going to file a complaint against the police, go ahead and do that. But realistically, like I don't know the background. My situation, where I come into play is when I get to that scene. Like once I've stepped onto that scene, now it's my scene as the medic, and I'm going to do everything I can for that patient to ensure that they get to the hospital alive and well. Whatever they did. Doesn't matter if they shot somebody. Like it's my responsibility to get them to the hospital and then let the court decide the next.
I think it harps on a lot, like you said, of just I wasn't there before things got escalated, but now I'm here and I had to assess what's going on now. I've walked on scenes where literally the officers are already, but when we get there, there's one outside and he's like, "Hey, you're going to need your ketamine. You're going to have to do this." And we get the guy on the stretcher or gal, whoever. We get them on the stretcher just fine. We load them up just fine. They're just fine on the way to the ER. I've also walked in nursing homes where the first thing that the nurse says, or whatever they are, is, "Hey, you're going to need that drug that makes them calm." And I looked, I said, "I'm going to need what?" Wait a second. This is an 80-year-old man with dementia. Now, granted, I've been in the situations where they're literally the guy's throwing desks, he's throwing chairs in his room. There's
but why,
5
right?
minutes hold him down. Yeah. Anyways, no, it just goes back to the idea of like, even before, if you have a patient whose blood pressure is trash over trash, do you automatically go to pressors, or do you wait a second, figure out what else works, what could work? You have a patient who's cutting up. Can you try verbal de-escalation, or do you have to go to the big guns and go ahead and just sedate them, because it's going to end up in a bad place for both you, yourself, and the patient?
So if you have intimate knowledge that this is going to end up at the worst possible way, then you should just be doing the ketamine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stop goofing around. Do it correctly. Do it. I mean, if you have to, get it. Like, sometimes you're not going to be able to de-escalate. It just is a matter of, that's just how it is. You're gonna fight patients. Like, I'm not saying you're gonna go to blows with them, but you are going to struggle with people. That is a part of the job. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you cannot chemically sedate every single patient because not everybody agrees with you. Like, if the patient is in the ambulance, okay, and they're behaving, but they're talking shit, that does not mean you need to sedate them, right? Like, that's just a matter of, you've got to deal with them for just a few more minutes and try to work through that. If they're beating the shit out of a couple of police officers when you get there and nothing is working, and you finally get this guy pinned and you can get enough ketamine into his deltoid or his quad to get him to calm, do it.
Yeah.
I promise. Fighting that person is not going to end well. Like, they do not feel like, I know this is going to hit hard and you probably have to bleep it out, but the thing, that retard strength you hear a lot, is legitimate. And the reason it is because, don't quote me on this, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but it's like when you punch a wall, all right? When you punch a wall, if you're somewhat, if you understand pain, you're only punching the wall as hard as you know that you're not going to break your hand, most likely. You're either going to do damage to the wall or you're not going to break your hand. Somebody who doesn't care right at that point is punching through the wall, and they will punch through you. And so you really have a decision to make. Like, do you want to get punched through, or do you just want to get some drugs on this person, put them in the back of your ambulance, secure them to the cot, maybe put soft restraints if it even is going to work, and try to get to the freaking hospital quickly so that they, with all of their infinite resources, can manage that patient. I don't want them in the back of my truck. I don't want to be inside of their house. I don't want to be moving with the cot with, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want them to wake up even and transfer from the back of the ambulance in the bay to the room. Like, I'm looking to get them off that cot and onto that hospital bed so I can be out of there.
Yeah. No, 100%. And there are situations where it's ask questions later, but solve the situation exactly in this moment because there's not a time to waste. And that's with ketamine. That's with, other medications that you don't get the full story of what's going on with the patient, but their heart rate is 183. They're straight SVT. Are you going to sit there and ask them like, hey, did you start experiencing chest pain before? Did you do this? No, you're going to go ahead, ask them their allergies really quickly and treat up the situation in that moment. And I think the same thing goes with those very not frequent, depending on where you work at. But those moments where there's no time to ask questions, you get exactly what you need and you treat, and then you figure out the situation later.
Yeah. I think that's completely logical. I see all the value in being a good observer, right? Being able to take in information very quickly and decide this is what needs to be done right at this moment for this patient. It doesn't matter whether you guys like it or not. You might not find it the most fancy, like ICU, like intensivists really don't like the way that we resuscitate when compared to the way that they resuscitate. Like, we're just so much more brash, like heavy-handed, and definitely come in with full guns blazing. Like, we don't fuck around. Like, do you guys still do nitroglycerin spray times like 1.2 for like CHF?
Yes and no.
Okay.
It's not in our protocol for CHF, but if they have chest pain and you're treating ACS, you can go ahead and do both, but that's not the point.
Okay. So, like, that was in my protocols at one point in time, and it was the last thing I remember like using, and it freaking worked. And now I don't know what the data says, so I could be very wrong, but it felt like it worked. Like, when I would give it, during with CPAP, the patient would, drop, their blood pressure would drop. And that's what I want. I want them to be able to just like come down, be able to breathe, and get them to the hospital so they can put them on BiPAP, they could intubate, whatever they need, diurese, whatever they needed to do. I wasn't able to do that. I asked to give the nitro during a hospital rapid, and they looked at me sideways. Like they were like, well, what in the fuck are you talking about? What are you talking about? And to me, it seemed like a totally logical do. Like it's taking 10 people to decide what to do. Person who I know for a fact I could have fixed 5 minutes ago if you just had let me. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we definitely know not to fuck around. Like if the patient is dying, you've got to do something, you do it. There isn't. The good thing about medics is they definitely react to situations. They do a good job of using their education along with their protocols as a guideline, and then couple that with the experience. And what are the medications? Even I protect the public through the use of chemical restraint. And that goes for both the patient and the public. As long as the patient makes it and survives, even if they require intubation, it doesn't necessarily mean you did a bad job. They may still had needed intubation regardless. So you're just kind of ensuring that everybody gets there safe and that this person isn't killed before they arrive at the hospital or die before they arrive at the hospital because they become such a challenge.
Yeah. And that's a whole other factor is the general public, depending on your scene, depending on your situation, who's recording the whole thing. I think that's another big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That goes to another point of not staying on scene, because the longer you sit around and dick around on there, the more people are snapping pictures at you. Get them in your ambulance.
Yeah.
You can close the doors and you didn't fit.
I think I lost you again. Maybe it's a sign. Oh, damn it, Bobby. We're going to go ahead and call it on that one. Basically, long story short, is ketamine is not a bad drug. Ketamine is not the end of the world. It's not something that if you push, your patient's going to go into cardiac arrest immediately, like some people like to believe. I think the synopsis of what we both agreed on, me and Aaron, is that if you use your monitoring, if you use your smarts and your wits and knowledge and experience, it's not a bad drug. So with every other medication we carry, give it with caution. Know what to expect. Know what could go wrong. Know what could possibly happen. Treat your patients accordingly. And that's the biggest goal of every call we run. Treat your patients accordingly. And that's all I have. So thank you for being here. And as we end every episode, so with that.
The 22 at the Lips podcast is designed to support, not replace, the relationship that exists between a practitioner and his or her medical director. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host, guest, and not necessarily of Master Medics. The information provided during this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for your approved protocols.